All right, folks, the police in this country are out of control. They really are. It's unfortunate to say, because I'm a leftist, but I don't hate the cops. I got cops in my family. But there seems to be a scenario in which there's a lot of impunity that these people are being allowed to operate with. It's unfortunate to say, but we've seen a situation where a lot of these cops have gotten away with stone cold murder. And just this week, a U.S. district judge named Charles Simpson has ruled that in the case of Breonna Taylor, that it was her boyfriend and not the police officers who illegally raided her apartment under false pretenses that was responsible for this young woman's death. So the federal charges against former Louisville police detective Joshua James and former Sergeant Kyle Meany that were announced by U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland during his visit to Louisville, those charges have been dropped. Now Garland accused James and Meany, who were not present at this raid, of knowing that they had falsified a part of this warrant and put Breonna Taylor in a dangerous situation by sending armed officers to her apartment. But Judge Simpson wrote that there is no direct link between the warrantless entry and Taylor's death. What?
No, you're lying. You're lying. What makes you lie?
Yes, Ned, they're lying. The judge ruled that there was no direct link between the warrantless entry and Breonna Taylor's death, which, how? They would not, she'd be alive if they weren't there under false pretenses. So his ruling effectively reduced the civil rights violation charge against James and Meany, which had carried a maximum sentence of life in prison. Now, for all of you who don't remember this case, let's start from ground zero. Breonna Taylor was 26 years old. She was a black woman. She was an emergency room technician. She was actually fatally shot by the Louisville Metro Police Department during a no-knock warrant raid at her apartment in March of 2020. The raid was part of an investigation into drug dealings, but Taylor was not the target. She wasn't the target. Her ex-boyfriend, who they already had in custody, was the one who was suspected of drug activity. She had a new boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who had nothing to do with drugs whatsoever. So, again, these police officers had no reason to be there. Now, following this incident, several of the officers involved were charged with federal crimes related to civil rights violations, particularly for falsifying the affidavit used to obtain the search warrant. Officer Kelly Goodlett had pleaded guilty to conspiring to falsify the affidavit, marking her as the first officer to face consequences linked to the preparation of this raid. Brett Hankinson, the officer who fired the shots through Taylor's apartment, faced trial but resulted in mistrials due to jury deadlocks on civil rights charges. Joshua James and Kyle Meany, who we just talked about, were accused of falsifying the information for the warrant. And you see the felony charges against them were dismissed by the federal judge. So this is where we are with this case. It's really unfortunate. But I saw this coming. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I remember when this happened, me and the Rev talked about this when the Rev was still here. Me and him talked about this. I knew that there was just, I knew that most of the police officers were not going to be convicted with her death because, as I said, every case ain't George Floyd. You know, you have to get the cops 100% red-handed like you got Derek Chauvin. That's really the only way you get real justice in this country when it comes to policing. Or the cop that killed Walter Scott, where the video leaked, it just showed the cop just unloading his gun in Walter Scott while he was running away. His back was to the officer. The officer said that he was fighting with Walter Scott. Somebody leaked the video from, I believe it was cell phone video of somebody else. That wasn't even what happened. He's running away. And that cop was convicted as well. That's really the only way. And I said at the time they were setting us up to be disappointed. And it's unfair, but it was totally predictable. I knew that when they paid Breonna Taylor's family all that money, that was them saying, this is all you're getting from us for the most part. This is what you're going to get. You know, and to keep it 100, her family was probably lucky to get that. The ghetto lottery, as they call it. Most of the time, black people can't even get that. You know, so many of us have relatives who've been killed or brutalized by the police. You know, I got beat up by the police when I was in high school. One of the worst experiences of my life. A cop just took me into an empty classroom and beat the crap out of me because he said he didn't like my attitude. And it was the most disempowering, event I think I've ever had to deal with in my life, because I know that this person's has my life in their hands, and so I can't fight back. But this guy's telling me I need to fight back, and he's slamming me over desks, and he's suplexing me like he's Scott Steiner or something, and he knows I can't fight back, or he'll shoot me. He'll find a reason to shoot me, or, you know, tase me or something. This is the type of abuse that I've gotten used to getting in the black community, and it really is unfortunate. Like I said, I knew that they weren't going to get, you know, all of these cops for these things. I knew that they were going to say that her boyfriend shooting back at the police officers, in spite of it being a no-knock warrant and him not knowing who they were. He actually called the police. Kenneth Walker called the police while the police were raiding his apartment because he thought some crackheads or something was breaking into his apartment. He didn't know they were the police. So that's how you know that the police did not adequately identify themselves while they were breaking into Breonna Taylor's apartment. It is really, really unfortunate that this is how it's gone, but it is what it is. Let me get this caller. Hello, caller.
I'm listening at you.
What's up?
You got to look at this from two different ways. If you're a police officer and you go to different situations and things, you're thinking about your life, and especially if you're in a black area. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, what if a police don't do nothing and then somebody haul up and shoot him or mess him up or whatever? Mm-hmm. Then you'll be saying, well, oh, what happened? You got this stuff going on all over the world. Before we had these cell phones and all this stuff, the film what's going on in this world about what's going on. Hey, it's situations where the people are right. The police didn't have to do this, what they did. And it's the situations where the police had to do what they did, or they wouldn't be here to tell you about it.
Mm. Well, so, I mean, in this case, there was a fraudulent warrant in this case.
Okay, fraudulent warrant.
Yeah.
Okay, but what the average person you see out here now, something happened.
Whatever man y'all.
They first thing they holler when something happened. Oh, they didn't have to do that. They just misunderstood what was going on. A lot of people are call the police and say, hey, we got such a sergeant here at the house. He's acting a fool and shooting and carrying on. He's on meds and not taking his medication. Now, I guess the police officer is supposed to come to your house now from now on with a doggone doctor and check the person out to see why they shot at him or what happened or why did they do what they supposed to did, you know. So you got it bad both ways. You can't show up at somebody's house 8, 9 times because they can call and talk about this person is acting a fool or shooting at somebody or trying to kill somebody, and then they show up and all of a sudden they have to kill him, and then they say, "Oh, they didn't have to do that. We looking for justice."
Well, I mean, we have to.
They're looking for that money.
Well, I mean, thank you for calling, sir, but that's not what. Thank you for your call, brother. That's not what this was. This was an out and out fraudulent. This was an out and out fraudulent scenario in which the police should not have been there at all. The police shouldn't have been there. This is not a situation. I agree with the caller that there are some instances in which, and I've been very critical of people. Like there was a situation, I forget what the Ma'Khia Bryant. I think it was Ma'Khia Bryant, where there was a young woman who had a knife, like a Ginsu knife or something, and she was swinging it, trying to plunge it into another girl, another teenage girl, and the cops shot her and killed her. And there was a lot of outrage about that. And I said, look, if I'm that other girl's parent, and that cop is standing there with a gun, and he lets Ma'Khia Bryant gut my child, or put that knife in my child's neck, or through her heart and kill her, then I'm coming for him. Period. I think it's important for us to not act like every case is the George Floyd case. Every case ain't George Floyd. Every case is not the police just, wilding out. There are some cases that I've always said we have to pick our battles. And this is why you have to have leaders. This is, one of the things that changed my life politically was Occupy Wall Street, right? If you watch the stream, then I'm sure you will see that I wear black every show. And I've worn black every day for like the last 15 years or so. Like, this is how I dress. I became an anti-materialistic populist because of Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street changed everything for me in terms of politically, a lot for me politically. And it convinced me to throw out all my jerseys and designer stuff and stop wearing Nikes and all these other things. It absolutely changed my political consciousness. And so when you have things like that happen, there's this tendency to say, we don't need leaders. And that was the downfall of Occupy Wall Street. We don't need leaders. Of course you need leaders. Why do you think the civil rights movement got so much accomplished from 1955 to 1968? In 13 years, Martin Luther King led by Martin Luther King, we went from a world with legal segregation, legal housing discrimination, legal voting discrimination, and the poverty rate in the black community at 60%, to a world with the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the black poverty rate under 30%, thanks to him and a man we're going to celebrate in the Happy Happies later on, Lyndon B. Johnson. That's why you have leaders. Occupy Wall Street said, we don't need leaders. You see a lot of these different groups, Black Lives Matter, we don't need leaders. This is why you need leaders. Because when you don't have leaders, you just wander aimlessly. And this is what unfortunately has happened to a lot of the movement for Black Lives, and what is called Black Lives Matter in this country. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these cases would be better off if we had a Martin Luther King type figure who's like, this may not be the case. For example, a lot of people, if you know your civil rights history, know that Claudette Colvin sat down on the bus and refused to get up before Rosa Parks. But she was a 15-year-old single mom. And the NAACP and all these people knew that if it was publicized and politicized that Claudette Colvin was the one who sat down on the bus and refused to get up and refused to go to the back of the bus, that the white media would have completely torn that young 15-year-old girl to shreds because she was a single mother, because she was a black woman. So what they did was the leadership said, let's send Rosa Parks, who is our secretary, who is married, who they can't tear apart and say she's a savage or anything, doesn't have a criminal record, isn't a teen mom, isn't all, who's married and all this other stuff. Let's send her, and she will get us the desired result we want. And now look at us. We live in a world where Rosa Parks is an icon. Her being arrested for refusing to go to the back of the bus is one of the catalysts for the movement that, again, got us civil rights, voting rights, fair housing, and drastically cut the poverty in our communities. That is why you need leadership. And that last caller that just called the officer, or at least the somebody who's sympathetic to officers. I don't know if he's an officer or not, but sympathetic to officers. He's talking about what happens when you don't have leaders. When you don't have leaders, every case, you just have a bunch of people who, whenever somebody black gets shot, start saying, oh my God, they shot my baby, and let's make a big deal out of this. No, you got to have discerning taste. You got to have a discerning eye, a discerning ear for which cases you can get justice in. And I knew from day one you weren't going to get justice in the Breonna Taylor case. Whether Kenneth Walker was right or wrong, I think he was right personally. Even the city of Louisville had to pay Kenneth Walker $2 million because they know they were wrong. That's why they had to pay both of the families. But I knew legally that this was not it. I knew it. It's unfortunate. It's unfair. But you got to have the discerning eye and ear and nose and taste to be able to understand which cases you can win and which cases you can't win. And the media was very desirous to have a female counterpart for George Floyd. It sucks to say, but it's the truth. They wanted to have a black woman to take some of the George Floyd energy. Because again, the people who run Black Lives Matter don't like straight black men. Let's just be real. A lot of these same, all three of them are lesbians and have a certain viewpoints about black men. And, this is one of the reasons why in their mission statement they said they wanted to dismantle the nuclear family and that they wanted to devote themselves to uplifting the trans and black women and black children. Didn't say nothing about black men. Nothing. Even though their entire company is built on the backs of George Floyd, of Trayvon Martin, of Rodney King, of Sean Bell, of Emmett Till, straight black boys and men. So there had to be a female counterpart, but I knew that this case, as sad as it is, as unfair as it is, untragic it is, was not a case that you were going to get any legal justice in. As always, rest in peace to Miss Breonna Taylor. My thoughts and prayers go to Kenneth Walker and both of their families. Kenneth's still with us. At least he got some money from it. At least I think he got $2 million. I know that can't, replace the woman that he loved, Miss Breonna Taylor, but that's about as good as he was going to get in America. It's unfortunate to say, but that was never going to be a case we were going to win. It's unfortunate, but what it has done is bring the light back on policing here in America. Now, I had to go all the way to England, not literally, but I had to go all the way to the British press, the UK Guardian, to find this information that the American police use force on 300,000 people a year. 300,000! And the numbers are actually rising post George Floyd. Yes, rising after all that marching and protesting. And once again, why is this? Because there wasn't a leader. There wasn't a leader. You know, the people, and a lot of it is because the way our media climate is and our cultural climate is, that nobody who isn't chosen by the elites in the liberal media, the corporate media, will be allowed to be a leader. You had guys like King D, Darren Seals, whose speeches I've played here on this show, who was a friend of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and he was a brilliant brother, and he was young, and he had come from the streets. He was there. He was one of the original Ferguson activists. Him, the Palestinian American Bassem Masri, and a bunch of those guys, all of them ended up dead. All of them. Mysteriously, too. Darren Seals was found with a bullet in his head in a car that was burned beyond recognition a few minutes after he'd been stopped by the police. Bassem Masri just magically had a heart attack or some sort of medical, all they said was a medical emergency, died of a medical emergency on a bus. The man was 30 years old. And there was another one who was found hung, and his parents thought he was lynched. And so the original, these are the people who would have been our Black Panthers today. But the establishment got to them, the elites got to them, and so what we get is Al Sharpton, we get celebrities, we get Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley or somebody. They give us the Butter Biscuit clans, the bougie, boule types who just tell us to keep voting for the same way we've been voting and never ask for anything for our vote. That's who we get. But the revolutionaries, they kill them or they put them in jail. And so we can't have Malcolm X's today. We can't have Martin Luther King's today. It's unfortunate to say. Now, these numbers about the 300,000 people a year having force used on them by the police came from Mapping Police Violence. Get acquainted with that site, Mapping Police Violence, which is a non-profit research group that tracks the killings by the U.S. police. They launched a new database called policedata.org, cataloging non-fatal incidents of police force, including stun guns, chemical sprays, canine dogs, dog attacks, neck restraints, beanbags, and baton strikes. This database features incidents from 2017 to 2022, compiled from public records requests in every state. Now, they found that in spite of the huge protest against police brutality, the overall use of force has remained steady and in many places increased, with our police killing 1,200 people each year. Now, this death toll has crept up every year and dramatically exceeds the rates in other countries. And so this is what I never understand about people who defend this. How can a lot of these people, especially right-wingers, Republicans, simultaneously make the argument that America is the greatest country in the world? There's never been a country greater than America. But somehow you have so many citizens that are criminals that you have to have your police that are constantly murdering them, brutalizing them, and you have to have the biggest prison industrial complex in the history of the world. You can't say both. America can't be the greatest country in the history of the world and the most criminal country in the history of the world at the same time. America has about a quarter of the world's prison population. How can you be the greatest country in the world if you have that many people incarcerated? Either you have that many evil people that need to be locked up and need to be beaten and killed by the police, which would disqualify you from being the greatest country in the world, or your system is so corrupt and damaged that the people whose job it is to uphold the law are murdering and brutalizing people, and you're incarcerating people with impunity. So either way, that doesn't do a lot of wonders for the whole greatest country in the world argument, does it? Either your population is criminal or your system is criminal. Take your pick. Or both. In either case, it doesn't do wonders for our argument here. Now, what they also found is that 31 agencies disclosed whether people were armed when they faced police force. On average, 83% of people who were subjected to force across those jurisdictions were unarmed. So 83% of the people who faced police violence are unarmed. Wow, that is incredible. And I know what you're thinking. What about race? Black people were subject to overall police use of force at a rate 3.2 times greater than white people in 2022. That disparity is even more severe than lethal force trends. Black people were killed by police at 2.6 times the rate of white people in 2022. And it also, when it comes to the homeless, 11 to 44% of people subject to force were listed as homeless. Up to almost half of the. So again, how can you have a country that has that many homeless people and still call yourself the greatest country in the world? It does not make much sense now, does it? Now, one thing we also have to take a look at is, I also got this from the UK Guardian, because of course, Dr. Roger Mitchell, the former Washington DC chief medical examiner, actually found out and exposed that a lot of homicides are mislabeled as accidents. So a lot of times when the police kill people, it is labeled as an accident. He wrote a book called Death in Custody. You might want to look that up. Dr. Roger Mitchell, Death in Custody. He said the book actually scrutinizes bias in death investigations and explores how coroners and medical examiners have produced autopsies that minimized or erased the role of the police, and in effect blame victims for their own deaths. So when you hear those statistics, well, you know, the police really only kill a few black people. It's not really what you... No. DC's medical examiner is telling you the police are killing a lot more people than are recorded. A lot of those accidents are murders. I did a story last year about the La Raza database. They found that a lot of the police murders, the police are killing a lot more people than are recording, of all races, blacks, whites, Hispanics, even Asians. Thousands of people since 2000 have been killed by the police who had their races mislabeled, who had their cause of death mislabeled. A lot of times it wasn't, their deaths weren't even properly classified. And a lot of this goes back to our culture here in this country, the United States of America, where me and the Rev talked about this when he was here. I've talked about this since. There's a lot of Americans who are okay with the police being a little fascistic as long as they are abusing black people and poor people and homeless people. They don't care. They don't care. It is what it is. And a lot of you don't really care that much. Let's just be real. Look who you vote for. Whether you vote for Donald Trump or you're voting for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, all of these people are part of this system who have helped to criminalize and brutalize black people and the poor. All of them. Y'all discard that as soon as y'all step into that voting booth. So let's just be real here. Some more things you're probably not going to hear on the mainstream corporate media. Law enforcement actually stole more stuff than burglars did last year. That's right. Asset forfeitures surpassed burglaries. How many people knew that? You're more likely to lose your stuff to the police than to have the burglars steal it. Even if you ain't do nothing, they still might take your stuff. It's happened. Oh, it's suspicious. How you had that much money? Give it to me. Now, a lot of how this happens, and I actually covered this story a few years ago as well. Check it out on the YouTube page, Scott Cannon WLTH. Scott Cannon Radio. It is Scott Cannon Radio now on YouTube. And I want to revisit this really quick before I have to go to break, because it is time for me to go to break. On average, American police officers spend 21 weeks training before they are qualified to go on patrol. 21 weeks. That is less than 6 months. Okay? From the Institute for Criminal Justice Training Reform, they put out a report that actually broke down how many hours the police train in this country in comparison with other countries. In Finland, the police have to train over 5,000 hours. Over 5,000. In Germany, it's 4,000 hours. In Australia, it's 3,500 hours. In England, it's over 2,000 hours. In Canada, it's over 1,000 hours. Guess how long American officers train on average? Guess, just guess. I'll wait. Hours. 500 hours. Less than 21 weeks, 500 hours. That is 1/10 of what officers in Finland have to do to become police officers. 1/10. For some more context, a lawyer has to train over 4,000, close to 5,000 hours to become a lawyer. A nurse, on average, has to to train 4,000 hours to become a nurse. A plumber has to spend 3,000 hours on average training. A cosmetologist has to spend almost 3,000 hours training. But a police officer, 500 hours. All I'm saying is there's a reason we got a bunch of bad cops.
Bad cops, bad cops. Bad cops.
We'll be right back after these.
Bad cops, bad cops. Bad cops, bad cops. Springfield cops are on the take. But what do you expect for the money we make? Whether in a car or on a horse, we don't mind using excessive force. Bad cops, bad cops. Bad cops, bad cops. Bad cops, bad cops. Bad cops, bad cops. Bad cops, bad cops.
Gamer Van Free.